Man, it's been years. Penn State finally doesn't have to schedule a pushover for the Whiteout game. Oregon, welcome to the greatest show in college sports.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. In this show, we're ending the debate about Penn State versus Pitt. I don't want to have it anymore. We're going to talk about that in the final segment, talk about some other kickoff times that have been announced so far, one of which is the Whiteout game. NBC has that nighttime slot, takes Penn State versus Oregon, no-brainer for Penn State. So let's talk about this matchup, the implications, the setup of all of this, because in a way, Fox is still disrespecting the Whiteout game here. I'm going to explain why in this opening segment. But finally, Penn State does not have to schedule a pushover, a team that they are significantly better, a national brand type of team. Ohio State, Michigan, okay, those have been big noon kickoff games, and you're not going to put the Whiteout at noon. I don't care what Fox thinks. I don't care what the executives say. Well, you can just have it at noon. You just put it at 12 p.m. It's the same thing. No, it's not. It is the Whiteout atmosphere that goes along with the nighttime atmosphere to combine those two things. It's aesthetically pleasing. So you need to have the Whiteout atmosphere at night to make the Whiteout have its purpose. It does not have any purpose at noon. It has to be a nighttime game. But this, or Oregon, out of all the home games, like I said, there was no other game that Penn State could have selected. I've had this debate or had this conversation for a couple of years now, and it's old. You're not going to put the Whiteout later in the season unless you absolutely have to. They went with Washington a season ago, but Penn State does not want to do that. They want it to be a game that's going to have nice weather, where fans are going to show up because of the opponent, weather, and kickoff time. Those are the three things you need, and all of those boxes are checked with Oregon, 7:30, earlier in the season, late September. But the game itself, this is a rematch of the Big Ten championship game. Penn State gets a chance at revenge. You have Big Ten conference implications now. You get to welcome Oregon, re-welcome them, I suppose, since this is their second year in the conference. Maybe you start to create a new conference. I want to be careful how I use the word rival here because Penn State is, again, unrivaled, but a foe that you want to have. And maybe it's going to be Oregon, since everybody seems to be chasing Ohio State. Maybe Penn State and Oregon are kind of in this similar tier. So it's going to create a dynamic matchup that is going to be good for the entirety of the season, with the storylines that are going to be before, during, and after. Like I said, with the season, this college football playoff resume implications are in this game. This could be a top 5 matchup. Top 10 at a minimum. I see both teams being top 5 by the time this game rolls around. That's week 4, right? Penn State shouldn't lose any games. Oregon should be undefeated as well. I mean, look at Penn State's non-conference schedule. Penn State's non-conference schedule is pretty easy, I gotta say. So this will be a top 5 matchup. These are top 5. These are, even if it's 3 versus 6, something like that, it's mostly a top 5 matchup, okay? And Oregon, who knows what uniforms they're going to break out? They have dozens of them. I imagine it's going to be some neon contrast. So I find that interesting that Penn State always wears the blue uniforms as opposed to the white jerseys for this game to go along with it. But it's supposed to be that Penn State, the whiteout crowd with Penn State's blue uniforms, and it's supposed to kind of overtake the opponent there. So everything lines up for this one. Penn State was never going to select Nebraska too late in the season. I don't think that's a bad idea. If it was earlier in the season, maybe you don't have Oregon here, but who knows if that's going to be a big noon kickoff at the end of the season, right? Not every single game has been announced to this point. That's why Oregon was the no-brainer. But I got tired of it. I got tired of Penn State scheduling Washington, Minnesota, a weaker Iowa team at the time. I guess Iowa's actually defeated Penn State in a whiteout game, so maybe I won't go that far. But Penn State, over the past few years, gets to dunk on these opponents that just aren't that caliber. You save the whiteout game for the purpose of the best home game, the toughest home game. Ohio State, Michigan, those games have been snubbed because Fox took them and put them at noon. But here's the interesting part of this discussion is that Fox actually passed on the whiteout this time around. Mum is not the word here. This was no secret that Penn State wanted to make Oregon the whiteout game because you already checked two of the boxes. The caliber of opponent and the storylines that go along with it, right? The revenge opportunity. That's kind of why they scheduled Minnesota, or that was the excuse for Minnesota, Iowa. You have that with Oregon here. Oregon's going to be a top 10, top 5 opponent, conservatively speaking, top 10. But Fox chose not to take this game with one of their first few selections. All of them are Ohio State. They've taken Ohio State with their first 3. It's a fantasy draft. For those who don't know how the whole TV contract works, Fox gets the first, I thought it was always the first 2. They get the first 3 selections. So Penn State, Oregon, and the possibility of the whiteout, just Penn State, Oregon in general, that matchup was not appealing enough to Fox. All right, well, you have the game. You have Michigan and Ohio State. Ohio State versus Texas. I got to imagine that Penn State, Oregon's going to be up there too. They probably took Ohio State, Penn State. I don't think that game's been announced. If it has, all right, I'm mistaken, but I don't think it's been announced, but I got to imagine that was, so Penn State gets some respect, but it's still the Ohio State game. If I'm a Buckeye fan, I am angry at all of this. I'm mad that Fox likes us the most. It has to do with ratings. It has to do with ratings. But Fox doesn't see Penn State and Oregon as that top 3 matchup with their first 3 selections. But NBC does. NBC's doing the right thing here by taking the game, and then Penn State reacts accordingly. Wasted no time. It was a debate. We had multiple conversations about this. Illinois, is Washington a possibility? Trying to predict this, trying to analyze which opponent should Penn State make as the whiteout. And it was exhausting. Trying to say, okay, well, this team isn't that good, but they're new to the Big Ten Conference, and Illinois could be a quiet sleeper team in the Big Ten, and trying to, again, justify these teams that just weren't that good. They weren't that caliber of team for that given season. Oregon, there's no debating about it. Drew Aller versus Dante Moore. James Franklin versus Dan Lanning. A chance for revenge. Nice weather, hopefully. Oh my goodness, if I jinx it, I'm hoping and praying for nice weather. But it's going to be late September. If there is some rain, okay. But it's not going to be cold, frigid temperatures. That was the Washington game. That was the whiteout last year. And that's not what Penn State wants. Recruiting impact. Oregon keeps targeting similar recruits that Penn State, I could name a handful of them in 2026. Recruits that Luke Wayful, Emmanuel Iannacho, Brandon Finney last year. Penn State ended up losing out on that one. How about we go back to 2024? Tyseer Denmark, where Penn State wins that one. But, you lose Brandon Finney there. And then Joey O'Brien. Akari Adams as well. This game could have recruiting implications. If Oregon wins on the road in the whiteout, that is massive. That is massive for what Oregon is trying to do in the second year of the they won the Big Ten Conference. They didn't win the college football playoff. But this would be a huge opportunity to fly all the way across the country, go into Penn State, Beaver Stadium, and win. First time in the whiteout. You don't think that's going to have huge recruiting implications? It will for Penn State. The big game. James Franklin can't win the big game. That's what they say. That's what everybody says. But when he does win a big game, 2 playoff games, I get it, they lose to Notre Dame. But the 2 playoff games don't count. The New Year's 6 bowl games don't count. All those other games in between in the regular season, USC on the road, none of those count. They just move the goalposts. You cannot deny that this is a big game. Penn State's going to be favored in this game. People are going to expect, most people should expect Penn State to win this game. And I'm glad it's the whiteout. We got more to talk about with the early kickoff times. Are there any trap games on this Penn State schedule? Oregon's a tough game. We know Ohio State on the road. That's going to be a tough one. But Iowa, Nebraska, Indiana, plenty of options for a game that Penn State cannot afford to overlook. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it is easy to lose track. Now that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. You'll get surprising insights. I started using Monarch for myself and I just realized how much I was spending on things like groceries or package deliveries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. You'll get all-in-one convenience instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. You'll get easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year over at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Are there any trap games for this Penn State football team that I believe is a national title contender? We're going to talk about some of the other kickoff times that have been announced so far and end the debate about Pitt versus Penn State in the final segment. I want to talk about the schedule overall. Addressing Oregon as the whiteout game, that's massive, as it should be. But when I look at this schedule, Ohio State's going to be the toughest game. It's a road game. This one's in Columbus. If that game was out in Oregon, flying across the country like that, Penn State's got to do that against UCLA. So there are some possible trap games in this schedule. I think this schedule is fair. The non-conference schedule is easy. Penn State should very well steamroll their way through Nevada, Florida International, Villanova. The first 3 weeks are going to be quite the stretch for Penn State before they get to Oregon. But it's a really good setup because they have those 3 games as the tune-up games. Then you got a bye week and you play Oregon. So I don't know if Penn State couldn't have asked for a better setup to where they're going to be pretty fresh going into one of the most important games of the season. I think the first trap game of some sorts, especially now that UCLA got itself a quarterback in Nico Iamaleava, how that came about, I have no idea. Never would have expected him to land at UCLA. Now, granted, he's from he's from California, I think. He's from the West Coast. So he goes back home. Okay. That game of Oregon, the whiteout, the juice that's going to go along with it, And then you got to fly all the way to Los Angeles, California in a week turnaround and play a UCLA team that is going to be looking for its own revenge, maybe return the favor for traveling to Penn State and Penn State winning convincingly. It wasn't a dominant game by any stretch of the imagination. So UCLA has a pretty solid setup. If I'm Penn State, they don't look past any game. The 1-0 mentality does go a long way. Penn State usually doesn't find itself in trap games. I can explain the Bowling Green game if you want me to. I can. That's going to take about a little bit of time. But the KJ Winston injury in that moment and Tom Allen basically having to reinvent the defense on the fly, that's how big of an impact KJ Winston had. But just to point to that briefly, I could explain that a lot further, but that in simple terms, Penn State had to change its defensive playbook against a very competitive, strong MAC team in Bowling Green. But like I said, Penn State doesn't normally find itself. They go 1-0. They beat the teams they're supposed to beat. So even if they do get into a close call, they still win at the end of the day. UCLA is, I don't think, going to be an exception here, but that's a game that I look at. You're coming off the Oregon game. You got to fly 6 hours across the country right after that against a UCLA team that's probably not going to bring the same type of energy going into that whiteout game. That's one that I have circled as, okay, this is a storyline here. At Iowa, spooky things happen at Kinnick Stadium when it's a night game. I don't know off the top of my head if that one's been announced or not. I don't think it has because I haven't seen it promoted and not a lot of people are talking about it because former players can attest to it. Playing in Kinnick Stadium at night is not ideal, to say the least. That close call, the walk-off Juwan Johnson touchdown in Penn State back in 2008, when that was a national title contending team and Iowa ended their hopes and dreams, you want that game to be at noon. You want Fox to pick up that game above all else. So this time, Fox, help Penn State out. Take the game and put it at noon. We'll see. And I completely skipped over 2021 when Sean Clifford got hurt. Penn State was undefeated. That was a top 5 battle. Taquan Roberson could not get it done. So Iowa games that either are in prime time, nighttime, or late afternoon that turn into night games do not bode well typically for Penn State. They got a better quarterback. There are some people that are extremely high on Iowa as a sleeper contender for the Big Ten Conference because of what Phil Parker does with that team. I am not looking forward to that game from a Penn State perspective of trying to go undefeated. That is absolutely a game that can trip you up. Indiana is going to be a good game. They upgraded their quarterback. This is a chance that we get to see James Franklin versus Curt Cignetti. Cignetti is a good coach, deserves a lot of respect. I know he didn't beat Notre Dame, neither did Penn State. We'll skip that part. But Cignetti is a really good coach from his time at James Madison to now right away. I mean, he's reinvented football at Indiana for what it's worth. That game is at home. I don't think that Indiana is the same caliber of team. I think there may be 1 or 2 wins not as strong. I could see them going 9-3, 8-4, but they're still a team that can pull the upset if you're not careful. Got a Mendoza's really, really good quarterback. Michigan State, again, I don't like that game later on in the season. I think that's a team with Jonathan Smith at the helm, former Oregon State coach, that they could peak later in the season. Aiden Childs is their quarterback, came over from Oregon State with Jonathan Smith. Nick Marsh is an up-and-coming receiver that should be at least projected right now as a first or second round NFL draft pick. They're only going to get better as time goes on. I would rather play Michigan State in that UCLA slot earlier in the season in early October, as opposed to late in the season like this and on the road in East Lansing. They're going to look to play spoiler. I don't have that on the concern meter. I probably have that one a little lower, but it has my attention. Then Nebraska, same thing. Dylan Raiola, a team that is only going to get better because the nucleus is fairly young and inexperienced together. Raiola's better days of football are only ahead of him. Matt Rule, coming back to Happy Valley, spent a lot of time at Penn State, as most of us know, right? Played there, coached there for briefly. But that's going to be a huge game for Matt Rule. An opportunity to stick it to his former school. Nebraska is one of those teams, and maybe could be undefeated by the time they get to Penn State. Whoa, that's a hot take. They could be. I think it's there. Do I think it's likely? No, I don't think it's likely. However, I do think the Cornhuskers have a chance of being undefeated coming into Penn State. There's a small chance, or with one loss on the schedule. That's a Nebraska team that's going to be looking to make the college football playoff this season. Outside of that, all these games are very much, and again, I don't have to explain why Ohio State's a tough opponent, right? We're talking about trap games here. Other kickoff times, as I promised. Nevada was announced. Home opener, 3:30 on CBS. Florida International. I know, barn burner, right? I shouldn't overlook these group of 6 teams in that second game of the season. Noon kickoff, Big Ten Network. Villanova, 3:30, Fox Sports 1. These 3:30 games, there's quite a bit of them for Penn State so far. Oh, and then Northwestern has either, you pick a time. You choose the time. It's either going to be at 12, 3:30, or 4 o'clock. The homecoming. That's the homecoming game for Penn State, by the way. So that's the schedule so far. More kickoff times will be released in due time. So be on the lookout for that, as will I. Now, let's talk about a game that isn't on the schedule. It is not going to be on the schedule for the foreseeable future. Maybe it could pop up, but it shouldn't. It doesn't have to. Penn State versus Pitt, that rivalry is over, and it's been over for a long time. So, like the rivalry, let's end the debate. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Pat Narduzzi was making headlines again. Penn State should play Pitt. Pitt wants to schedule them. Penn State's ducking Pitt. They're avoiding them. They're scared of them. Whatever justification, whatever reasons, right? Should Penn State play Pitt every year? Should they even play them at all? No, because this rivalry, this hasn't been that kind of caliber of game since the 70s, the 80s. When Penn State joined the Big Ten, I think all of that obviously went away, since that wasn't a routine type of game. But in simple terms, Penn State became a national brand and Pitt did not. Pitt did not keep up with the changing landscape of college football, whereas Penn State did. Penn State doesn't need to play Pitt. Pitt needs to play Penn State. That way, I mean, it benefits Pitt. Even if they lose the game, it benefits them from the financial standpoint, from being in the spotlight. Well, maybe not, because if Penn State's going to continue to win by 30, 40 points in these games and take over Acrisure Stadium in the process, then maybe it's not worth it to Pitt. So you get the financial benefit out of it, you get the TV network, but maybe if you get absolutely destroyed, you don't want that game. Penn State's not avoiding Pitt. They don't need to play them. The Big Ten conference schedule is as tough as it is. 9 conference games, and this is something that James Franklin has always talked about, that those games that you used to have where you had 4 non-conference games and then you could schedule somebody because you needed to get into the 4-team playoff. You needed to bolster your schedule. But now with the Big Ten conference expanding, you don't need to go outside of the Big Ten. This was the whole point of conference expansion, so you wouldn't have to go outside of your conference to get those resume building wins. UCLA, Oregon. I know what righteous Pitt fans are going to say, that, well, they're better than UCLA. Okay, so be it. but I would say that they're in the similar category that, and who knows? I think that this UCLA team could probably beat Pitt, or it would be close. I think it's a 50-50 coin flip. I'm not here to debate. This isn't Locked On Pitt or Locked On UCLA. But Penn State, I will say this, does still stay true to the historical roots of college football, because they scheduled a series with West Virginia. They tried scheduling, COVID changed this, but they tried scheduling Virginia Tech. They have Syracuse on the docket in the not too distant future. I think that one begins in 27, 28. So Penn State has 9 Big Ten conference games, which more than is sufficient. So you don't need to go outside of the conference to schedule these kinds of games, especially where you don't gain anything from this. Pitt doesn't hurt you in recruiting. Penn State constantly goes to that's why they're focusing on the east side. That's why they're focusing on Philadelphia and starting to branch into New Jersey, because Pittsburgh, the western side of the state, is on lockdown for Penn State recruiting. So they don't need to prove anything at that point. Everything's taken care of. But the regional rivalries, don't get me wrong. Would it be exciting? Does it pay tribute to those games of the past? Absolutely. I'm here to say they don't need to schedule them. If it's convenient for both schools, after Penn State plays Syracuse for its little mini series for a couple of years, 28, 29, in that neighborhood. In 2030, 2031, if Pitt's interested in scheduling a home and home for 2 years, I'm not against it. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying it doesn't have to, nor should it have to. Because as college football continued to change, Penn State changed with it, and Pitt stayed stuck in the past. There's nothing. So Pitt's got a lot of ground to gain before they can say that they are the similar type of brand that Penn State is. And I know that Penn State fans would agree with me on this. So scheduling that non-conference game, in addition to the already nine conference games that you have, you would much rather play a Virginia Tech because it's not a routine team. Or what about an Alabama or one of the top schools in the ACC? Why are you interested in scheduling a middle of the pack team in Pitt when potentially Clemson? Would you rather play Clemson? Absolutely. You would absolutely want to play Clemson, do a home and home with the Tigers, Dabo Swinney, Tom Allen now. So does Pitt really need to take up one of those spots? No, they don't. It's not worth it. So if the opportunity presents itself, sure. If James Franklin and Pat Narduzzi and both sides, Pat Kraft, wants to agree to that, a 2-year home and home series for whatever, 2031, 2032, because that's probably when it would happen, if it would happen. But it doesn't have to, because Pitt fell way behind Penn State in this landscape of college football. That's where we're going to wrap things up in this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A lot of cool, interesting topics covered here as we are in the off season, but this show does not take a step back just because we are in, the off season here. But that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Thank you again to the everydayers for making us a part of your regular routine. If you are not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Leave a like, share this episode with friends and family. And for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, football, basketball, wrestling, recruiting, you name it, it is all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.